This tape is going to be primarily about Mom and her growing up years, from when she was born and all about her through when she was at college. And then in later tapes we'll talk about what happened after college and marriage and children and stuff like that. Turn this off. There we go. So, Mom, where were you born and how many are in your parents' family?
Okay. I was born in Rexburg, Idaho, at my grandmother's.
In her house?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. In my grandmother's house in Rexburg. And my mother was Lowette Stevens McKinlay, and my father was Archibald McKinlay. And mother was Dad's third wife. Daddy married Anina Christine Anderson, and they had Ann and Cecil, Bob and Chris, and Shirla. When Aunt Nina, or no, Lucille. Good grief.
Sorry.
No, it was Lucille, not Shirla.
Okay.
I know that. I'm glad you were here.
Yeah.
When Shirla's mother was pregnant with Shirla, or when Lucille's mother was pregnant with her, she got breast cancer. And after Lucille was born, she never got out of bed again. She died then of breast cancer. And then later, when Lucille was a mother with 4 children, mostly grown, she died of breast cancer also. Then after Daddy's first wife died, he married Debbie Stevens, and they were the parents of Shirla. And while Shirla's mother was in bed, still, I mean, we stayed in bed for 10 days after we had babies in those days. 10 days at least. And Shirla's mother got typhoid and died. And it was kind of an interesting thing. My father, after Aunt Debbie died, my father got typhoid. And when the doctor came to see him, he said, Arch, you need to decide what to do with these children and who you want to take them and take care of them, because you're not going to get well. You're real bad. And as I remember what my father told me, he didn't tell me this till after I was married, and I didn't know about this. But anyway, he said after the doctor left, he thought about what he should do with his children, and he thought, I cannot leave my children. I don't want to leave my children. And he said, I just turned over with my face toward the wall, and I prayed harder than I have ever prayed before or since. And I told the Lord I had to stay and take care of my children and not let me die. And he said, after I got through praying, he said, I turned over and started to feel better immediately. And he said, pretty soon I turned over and sat up on the edge of the bed. And I was all well. Anyway,
That's interesting.
then their first child. So maybe I better tell you again who the first ones were, so you'll know that I really do know.
Sure.
It was Anne and Cecil, Bob, Chris, and Lucille. And then second wife, Aunt Debbie, was the mother of Shirley. And then my father married my mother, Louette Stevens, and it's a different Stevens. Debbie Stevens was Stevens, and my mother was Stephens.
And you were?
And then I was the first of their children. And they had 6 children after me. So Daddy had 13 children. And I was the one in the middle. There were 6 older and 6 younger. And my brothers and sisters were Douglas and Billy and Kay and Bunny and Margie and Ken. Now what do you want?
I didn't.
Oh, and we lived in Newdale, Idaho. My father was a farmer, and he owned a farm implement company there in Newdale.
What did they sell?
They sold farm implements.
Tools and
Like
equipment?
Like tractors and planters and drills and harvesters and things like that.
In those days, they didn't have tractors.
Well, they sold whatever. Big
Plows.
You didn't say tractors. Huh?
Plows and trailers and hitches and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Plows, traders,
Drills,
drills,
harvesters.
mhm. Threshing machines, I guess.
Sure.
They had those things.
So you lived in Newdale, Idaho,
Mhm.
and what do you remember about your father? Tell me a little bit about him. What was he like?
My father was...
Where did he come from?
Mhm.
Where was he born, and where did he come from?
My father was born in Scotland.
Do you remember where? I don't remember.
He was born in Donegal County, Letterkenny. He was born in Letterkenny in Donegal County,
Scotland.
Scotland. His parents were miners, and he...
Did your grandmother work in the mine too? She carried a big
Everybody worked in the mine.
Wow.
coal mine.
In the coal mines. Grandfather ran the train that went into the mine and brought the I guess, and they took the coal out, brought the coal out to dump in the wagons or whatever they used then.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was then.
Horses or mules or something.
Probably.
Full of that and
Probably then.
Yeah.
engine.
Well, they had an engine.
Did they?
He drove an engine on what kind of engine it was, but it was an engine. And a little train thing on tracks, you know.
What do you know what his motivation for coming to the United States was?
Yes, they joined a church
In Scotland.
in Scotland. Missionaries came to him, and they joined the church when their neighbors ridiculed them, and they were made to...
Now these were your
These were
grandparents.
my grandparents, and it was something for Scottish people to change their minds, and because of the government, the oppression, and the class distinction then that held you where you were, you know, it was very hard for them to break the tradition of being members of the Church of England, I guess. And so when they joined our church, they were ridiculed, made fun of, and but they were so poor, having been just minors all their lives, and not being paid. I mean, they paid miners so little that they couldn't get out of mining. You know, they couldn't make any progress, and they didn't have enough money to leave. And at that time, most of the people who could left the country to come to the United States to join the saints, to join, because members of the church left, but they didn't have enough money to leave. And so my Uncle George, he sent their oldest son, who was then 17, over here, and he came probably, their parents had joined also. My father's parents had joined the church.
Yeah.
Mary Hamilton and George McKinlay had joined the church, and they came over probably in the same company that their grandson George came over in to make a living and to earn. And he came over and worked in mines when he got over here.
Now this is
To begin with, that's my Uncle George, my father's oldest brother.
okay.
His oldest sibling, actually.
It was her father's father and her grandfather and mother who came over with
George, can you see? Okay,
Your father's parents.
grandparents.
Your father's grandparents joined the church.
And my father's parents joined the church also. And then,
It was the grandparents and the oldest son, oldest brother, who came over.
Oh, I see. Okay.
and in 9 months he had earned enough, he could make enough over here, more over here, than all of them could over there. He could earn enough that he sent money for them to come over here, and then they came.
So all of your parents, both of your grandparents then, and their children came over. Your parent, your father,
My father's mother and father, and
their
his
children.
grandparents.
and their children
And
came
the
over.
children came over.
That's neat.
And now all of my great-grandfather's children didn't join the church. All of them did not. Some did, but all of them didn't. And I don't have accurate information yet about what has happened to them since. Because we just kept track of my grandparents' family.
Well, maybe that's where you need to go on a mission.
Yes, go back
Scotland.
and get some of those people taken care of. Yes. But anyway, and that would be a nice thing to do, a nice place to go.
Tom Hall's abandoned.
My father, well, we have several records. It seemed to me that my father said that he was 9 months old when he came over. One of the histories that I have says that he was 3 weeks old. And so I haven't looked up, I'm sure there are records that would tell us the difference, but anyway, he was a baby. And I suspect he was closer to 3 weeks than 9 months, but I would have to look up the shipping records and find out exactly when they sailed, and then you can tell. He was just a baby anyway.
Just a baby. And so then they came over and started their life here.
They came over to Provo, and then they moved up in Idaho to Teton City in Idaho, and they lived there, and then grandfather taught school there, and my father taught school for a while he was there also.
Where in Provo did they live? Do you know?
No, I don't know where they live, but my great-grandparents are buried here, and I know where their graves are. So that's kind of interesting.
You need to show that to us.
That would be your great-grandparents. You could see their graves.
3 graves? Arches?
Arch is your grandparent,
Right.
And so it would be your great-great-grandparents.
That's right.
Because Robert would be your great-grandfather, and George your great-great-grandfather.
Right.
So it great-great-grandfather.
George is the one that came over with the
With
grandson.
his Mary, with, yeah, the grandson. Mhm. Okay, and my father, I don't know how to explain to him. He was very honest, and he was the kind who took care of everyone in our little town. Newdale was just a little town. And my earliest memories are running down the sidewalk for him to come home from the implement company where they sold farm equipment and things. And running, and I must have been very small, and I remember running to meet him when he was coming home. And another of my earliest memories are going to Sunday school with him on Sunday morning. And my thoughts of it, I remember sunshiny morning and walking along the path with him, with his hand in mine, and thinking, if he doesn't hold tight, my little hand will come out of his big one, you know. And I remember having to skip to keep up with his steps, because my steps were so little, and I could remember how much I really had these scriptures and Sunday school books in his other hand, and me in this hand, and I can remember going to Sunday school in that way. Really happy memories. And
He was really one of the outstanding members of the community.
yes, he was. And if anyone was ill, my father was always there. I remember he always took oranges. He had a great big bag of oranges he used to take to anyone who was sick and anything else they needed, and he would always leave money with them. And I can remember the widows. He just automatically had the coal company fill up the widows' coal bins with coal in the fall when it started to get cold and things like that. And so he was really very compassionate in that way, going to take care of the sick and help them with anything that they needed and that kind of thing.
Tell us about your mother now. Where she was raised.
Yeah.
Mother was raised up in Teton Basin, and her parents were William Nephi and Susanna Lorena Ellsworth Stevens. And Grandpa Stevens was a farmer, and he was also someone in the government. I don't remember what he did, whether he would be he was a senator or a representative or what he was in the Idaho Senate, but he was also, at another time, he was state game warden for many years. And one of the little things that he thought was a neat thing that he did is he brought pheasants, the Chinese pheasants, into Idaho, and they planted pheasants around in different areas in Blackfoot, and he took care of things like the fish hatcheries and things like
Are
that.
those the pheasants with the long tails? He's the one that started them.
Yeah, he's the one that started them. He's the one that brought them into Idaho. And Grandma's father was Edmund Ellsworth, and he was captain of the first handcart company that came across the plains.
That's right, I've read his history.
And he had 3 wives. He was a polygamist. He had 3 wives and I think about 52 children. My mother was not very well when she was little. She was very small, and she said her mother rubbed her with oil every day to strengthen her. And she also gave her cod liver oil every day, this big, thick, black cod liver oil that she would that dark. And you just took a big tablespoonful and gulped it down and you washed it down with orange juice.
That's nasty.
But Mother, when Mother married my father, he was 18 years older than she was. And my grandmother thought, oh, that was a wonderful thing because poor weak-old Mother would never be able to have children. And Grandpa had, my father already had 6 children. And so Grandmother was very relieved that Mother married my dad. But as it turned out, she just got huskier and stronger all the time, and she had 7 children. And I was their first one. And Mother was an artist and a lot of fun. And it's fun. I ought to read you some of the things that my cousins, who were about the same age as Mother, because Mother was one of the youngest of her family, and her oldest brother was quite a bit older than she, and his children were about Mother's age. No, they were older. Mother was just a little bit older than his children, so that when Mother did things for them, they were just delighted. She used to take them to the movies, so she was a little older. She was their aunt, and she took them to movies, and she would take them out early in the morning, and they'd go out and watch chipmunks. She learned to love the early morning because her grandmother, who lived with them for about 20 years, her grandmother and her mother would take her out early in the morning and show her the wild roses on the ditch banks and the wildflowers. And they'd pick them and show them to her and say, now, look, Louette, see, each one always has 5 petals. And look at the way they curl, and look at the way the little things are inside. And see, this is a pistil, this is a stamen, and explain to her. And she started drawing them and became a really fine watercolorist. And she did mostly florals. But she started when she was young. She took a lot of art lessons too when she was young, and taught a little bit. And she did china painting and learned to do ceramics later on, and did china painting on the ceramics and things like that. We have a lot of lovely things that she's painted. And she was just a lot of fun. I can remember when she was a Relief Society president, and we made dolls out of silk stockings. And they would stuff the dolls and tie them, and Mother would paint faces on them, and we embroidered faces on them. And for Relief Society bazaars, we had dozens and dozens of them with dresses on and things. And she did just lots of fun things. She was a very fun mother and a fun grandmother. And we all enjoyed her and loved her.
Well, what do you remember about growing up? What did you like? Let's start talking about you now that we've talked about your parents a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to go ahead and move on and talk about you now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What did you like to do when you were little?
I like to do all kinds of girl things like climbing trees and playing ball and things like that. I used to. We had and swim in the canal. We had about a canal that was about a block away from our home, and it had grassy banks, and we had great big willow trees along the bank. And I used to take a blanket and a book and go up there and lie on the bank and read books. And then when I got started reading all the Tarzan books, I left the blanket on the ground and climbed up in the trees, and I sat up in the big willow trees. And and read Tarzan books and other kinds of books.
Didn't she get after me
Anne
at
of
one
Green
point in
Gables.
time?
What?
Anne of Green Gables.
Anne of Green Gables and such. What did you say?
Didn't you get after me at one point for reading the Tarzan book?
I don't think I ever would have done it, unless you were 25 or something like that. I thought the Tarzan books were wonderful. I just could relate to be out in the jungle like that was so wonderful. And I was in the jungle when I was up on the ditch bank in those great big trees. I could almost hear the monkeys making noises and the wild birds. Chimpanzees. But one of the things that I remember most about the canal was the day I learned to swim. The canal where we swam was, most of it was just about 3 feet deep. And some of it a little bit less than that. If you got on the sides, you could mud crawl. And mud crawl means you get down in the water and put your hands down in the mud and you kick your feet and you go along and it feels like you're swimming. That's mud crawling. You kick your feet and in the water and splash in the water because you just got about 2 feet of water or 3.
Yeah.
And your fingertips just reach the mud and just to hold you up and you can move along with that and then you kick your feet and that's like you're swimming.
Yeah.
You don't get your head under.
You don't get your head under. But then there was a deeper place that the farmers used to take their horses through because there was no bridge for the horses to go over and they take their horses through there and so it was deeper there. It was maybe 4 or 5 feet deep there so that you couldn't you couldn't mud crawl across that. You had to swim or you didn't go across that. And so I tried to learn to swim. And every day in the summer I would go up there and all morning, as soon as I got my work done, I'd go up and swim up there and try to learn to swim. And then I'd have to come home for lunch and I'd get to go back again in the afternoon and practice again. And one day I could tell I was just almost ready to swim. I could tell. I just felt like maybe I was almost swimming across that place instead of walking across it. I was swimming almost, and I just knew I was almost there. And my mother came up. My mother came up and asked me to come home. She said she had, and I said, "Oh, Mother, let me stay a little while." "No, lunch is ready. Come right now. You can come after lunch." So I went home, but I was so excited I could hardly eat because I knew I was almost there. And so I went home, and after lunch, I said, "Mother, I'm ready to go swimming." She said, "Honey, I have to run down to the grocery store. You stay here with the little children." And she was talking about Doug and Bill and Kay and Bunny. So I had 4 little brothers and sisters younger than I, and I must not have been very old. I wouldn't have been more than 10, and probably less than that. And Mother said, "You stay here and take care of the children until I get back, and I'll just be a little while, and then you can go swimming." And so I waited and waited. It seemed like a long time. It probably was a half hour or so. And I thought, she said, "Now, Dottie, don't take those children up to the canal." And I thought about that. I thought, I could just, they mind me because I'm the oldest, and I could take them up there and put them on the ditch bank and make them sit there, and I could go in and I know I can swim. Next time I go in, I know I'll be able to. And so I disobeyed my mother and took the little kids up there. And can you imagine how she felt about having those little tiny kids up on that canal? But I took them and I made them sit down in a row. And I told them not to move, to watch me, because I was going to be able to swim. And they sat there, they didn't move, and sure enough, I got in that water and I could swim. And I just went across that deep spot over and over. I was so thrilled. And all of a sudden, here came my mother, and you can imagine how she felt. She just ran from the house up to the canal because she just knew one of the children would be gone. And she said, Dottie, you get out of that water and come home right this minute. And she took those four little kids and started home. I said, but Mother, watch me swim. Look at me, I can swim, I can swim. She said, you get out of that water this minute and you come straight home. And then I realized that to her, at first I was really, really hurt. But in my being hurt, I realized that it was more important to be obedient than to learn to swim. It was more important to Mother that I learned to be obedient than that I learned a skill. I learned to swim or something wonderful, you know. And that lesson has kind of stayed with me because I think it applies in a lot of other spots. When you see that if you were just a little bit disobedient, you could accomplish this. Or if you were a little bit obedient, you could do that, you know. And I learned that it's more important to be obedient than it is to learn something new or accomplish something or something like that.
That's a very interesting story.
Anyway.
I think it's neat that you would have the sensitivity at that time to know, to recognize that it was more important to be obedient instead of just being hurt.
Mm-hmm.
That your mother didn't care that you learned how to swim.
Because I'm sure that after I had sufficient punishment, which my punishment was probably not being able to go swim all that day, she probably went up the next day and watched me swim. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, it was an important day in a lot of ways for me.
Tell us about your grade school and what you remember about school up there.
What was it like?
I just loved school. When I was in the first grade and learned to read, I was so excited. I read everything that they could find for me to read. And I remember them saying, why, Dottie has read 18 books already, you know, and I'm sure that they were little simple books, you know, but I can remember everybody being so proud of me because when I just barely got started in school, here I was reading 18, I'd read 18 books already. And after I had been to school, when it got to be about Christmas time, the school wanted to pass me to the second grade at Christmas time and have me go into the second grade. And my father said, no, she isn't that bright. And I listened well to what he said. Unfortunately. Anyway, he said, no, she needs to stay in the first grade. And they said, no, Brother McKinlay, she can start in the second grade, and she's up with the second grade students already in the second grade. She can just start out at Christmas time. She won't be behind. But my father was convinced that I needed to stay in the first grade. And because they insisted, and because that kind of miffed him a little bit, he took me out of school. And I would go to school from Christmas until spring, till the next fall. And of course that wasn't wise to him, but that was kind of a Scottish temper way to do, you know. A little bit of an, well, can't tell me what to do, or I'll this, or this, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think he argued or fussed or anything like that. He just opted to keep me home from school. So I guess the school just let it go, knowing his strong will. And then I started in the second grade. just love school, all through school. I enjoyed it.
Did you have any favorite teachers or subjects?
No, I loved all the subjects. I loved everything. And I liked all my teachers but one. I had one that teacher that I think hated school. And I guess I didn't like him in the first place. And then after I did something that I was not supposed to do, then I liked him even less. But we got along fine, and I still got good grades in that class. But we had big, low windows, and the year before, with another teacher, the kids in that room had locked their teacher in, and he climbed out the window and got home. And that was all there was to it. And I'd heard about that, and so one day I did some things that girls, I had some really, my sense of humor got the best of me. Sometimes my sense of humor got me into trouble. And I just thought as I walked out the door, we had a door, the locks were a flat piece of metal that came over and left a little loop sticking out, and you hung a padlock in that. And the padlock was in that loop, just hanging loose, when I went out the door. And I went out the door and I thought, oh,
I could close this.
I could close that and lock him in. So I did. I closed it and locked the lock and went out. And when I went out, I made the mistake of telling some boys who were sitting out on the steps, so I just locked the teacher in. And so then I started merrily on my way home with another girl. Anyway. Let's see.
This was the teacher that...
This is the teacher that I didn't like very well.
Okay.
And let's see. How old would I have been? I would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would have been in the 5th or 6th grade. So I would have been 10 or 11, don't remember which. I think 10, maybe 11, I'm not sure which. Anyway, I locked the door and started home. And the teacher came whirling out of there, and the boys on the steps told him, he thought the boys had done it, so of course he grabbed the boys and they said...
He got out through the window.
No, the thing is, he didn't do what the other teacher did. I thought he'd just be a good sport and jump out the window and go home, But he didn't. He found himself locked in, and he just walked back and banged against the door and he broke the lock off the door, and came out and grabbed the boys because he thought it was the boys who had done it. And they told him I'd done it, so he came down the street in his car and he got me. Don't tell the whole story of that. That's so awful.
Did he take you home? And
No, when I saw him coming, I got scared, and this girl that was with me, I thought, oh, I don't want to take all the blame myself. And I said to the girl, Clea, I'll give you a nickel if you'll take half the blame.
That's great.
And she said, yes, she would. And right at the time I thought, that's dumb, Clea. But anyway, she did. And he came and got us in the car and took us back out and got the principal.
Oh.
And we were in our room, and I had to look at the broken lock. We had to look at the broken lock. And the principal came in, and they said, the principal said that what I had done was the wrong thing, and I had to apologize to Mr. Stewart. And I said, no, I'm not going to apologize because I thought it was just a joke, and I thought he'd climb out the window and go home like the Mr. Stewart that we had last and the boys locked him in. And I didn't know he was going to get mad and break the door down. So I said, I don't think I need to apologize. And the principal.
I'm sure the principal really liked that.
And the principal looked down at the floor and looked around in the corner and finally said, well, I guess if you aren't sorry, that we'll just have to do something to help you to be sorry. And I thought, oh man, this is getting out of hand. And so I said, all right, I'm sorry. And I don't remember stomping my foot, but the principal was a good friend of my mother and father. And I remember a few days later of my overhearing, and he was in talking to my parents, and I started to come in, and I backed out when I saw him, and I heard him say, and when we insisted that she say she was sorry, she just stomped her foot and said, okay, I'm sorry, but she stomped her foot, and we knew she really wasn't.
That's the Scottish way.
That's great.
He said, I had a really hard time not to laugh right out loud through the whole thing.
The principal said that?
The principal said it. He said, I had a really hard time not just laughing through the whole thing.
I bet that makes you feel good to know that he thought it was funny.
I did.
That was Brother Cutler.
That was Brother Cutler. He was my favorite teacher. He was not only the principal, he taught 7th and 8th grades, so I had him for both years. And I thought he was just wonderful. Not only that, I thought he was handsome. He had dark hair and just a little bit of gray, like just a little tiny bit. And I thought he was a wonderful teacher, and he just made us want to learn and want to know things, and he brought extra books in to read to us and extra ways to teach us. He figured out different ways to teach us and such. And so then...
And when she was in the 8th grade, then she was the smartest one in the school. And she was the valedictorian for her 8th grade class.
It was just a little class, but I was the valedictorian.
Oh.
And I remember giving the valedictory address at the graduation exercises. And I can imagine the principal laughed again, because when I look back, when I think about the talk, the only thing I remember about my talk is that I gave the poem, Sail On, Columbus's Sail On, you know.
Yeah.
And I think about that when I got older and read that poem, and I thought that's what I gave it for my 8th grade graduation. I thought, my heavens sakes, I'll bet the principal just sat there and died laughing, listening to me give a talk.
So serious.
Such a serious, and talking about sail on, when I was only 14. Anyway,
That's
that was
neat.
my grade school. Oh, another thing that I remember about grade school is how much I loved the playground. I could pump in the swings higher than anybody, and I dared go on the giant strides higher than anybody.
What are the giant strides?
Well, that's a big metal pole that has chains hanging down with handles on them. And at the top, it has a swivel so that the chains will go around. So you get, one kid takes hold of every of a chain, and then you go around and you keep going around and going around, and pretty soon you get, so you kind of whirl around and you can jump up, you know. And what we did is, one of us would, what we call wind up, and that means all the kids would take hold of their chain, and then one would come out and walk around all the rest and wrap his chain around all the rest.
Oh.
Several times.
No,
Yeah.
just once.
Just once?
I think just once.
Okay.
And then you'd all start walking around and going around faster and faster, and the one that had the chain on top of all the other kids would just fly out around all the other kids. You know?
And mother could do that better than anybody.
And I thought that
Oh, that was that one kid. Well, that was the giant stride.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the giant giant strides were called the whole thing.
Oh, the whole thing.
Because you could all take big jumps as you went around. Hang on to your chain, just take a big jump and go down. So you could really take giant strides.
2 or 3 steps and swing out.
Yeah.
Each one of them would be 6 or 8 of them going around like that.
Yes, we take 2 or 3 steps and give a jump, and then you swing way out, you know.
Yeah.
The one who was wrapped around, they
Okay, we're back.
Okay, I can remember one other little thing that impressed me a lot when I was little. Want to know about that?
Yeah.
In our backyard, we had a swing, and I can remember, I always knew that my father loved me, and he acted like he loved me, and I thought that was me. One day, I can remember, it seemed to me that it was afternoon, and he came out with me. We had been somewhere together, and he sat down in the swing. And I remember walking up to him and hugging him, and telling him I loved him. And he said, "I love you too, dear." And he said, "You know, I love you so much, I wouldn't trade you for $1,000. And I thought, oh my heavens. I thought, $1,000 was a lot of money, you know. And he said, "I wouldn't even trade you for $10,000. He said, "In fact, honey, I love you so much, I wouldn't trade you for $1,000,000. I wouldn't trade you for anything in the world. I love you so much." And I know that's a silly little thing. You wouldn't think a child would be very impressed. But I was just mightily impressed. And I just felt like I must be very, very valuable. Because my father, who knew me really, really well, wouldn't trade me for anything. People couldn't even buy me. People could offer him $1 million for me. And he wouldn't even take that. And that was interesting to me. I hope that I made my own children feel that I value them $1 million, that I didn't trade them for anything, you know, that they were that valuable to me.
I think so.
tell us about the house and where you lived and the neighbors.
So for all those first 14 years, did you live in that same city?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Then what happened?
We moved, we were born in Rexburg, you see, but then we actually lived, which I should put on the first part of the tape. We lived in Newdale. My mother just went to my grandmother's house when I was born.
Hmm.
And the rest of our children, my brothers and sisters, were all born in that house, except Kent. Kent was born after we got to Rexburg. But
So your mother...
it seemed like I loved our house because of my father built it. And I thought the woodwork was so beautiful.
Where? In
Newdale.
Newdale.
I thought the woodwork was so beautiful and the paneling was beautiful. And I thought it was lovely. And I remember that on one of the draperies, one of the velvet draperies, or velveteen drapery, my mother had painted flowers and things in oil paints on that, and it made it such a beautiful, beautiful stretch of draperies, you know. Oh, it was just beautiful. So I loved it. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs, and 1, 2, 3 downstairs, and a washroom and a storeroom. And a storeroom where we didn't have a refrigerator at first, and they would milk the cows and put milk in a big pan this big around, and then only this deep, and then the cream would rise to the top. And I can remember going downstairs with a slice of bread into the storeroom and taking a spoon and scooping off some of that thick cream and putting it on a slice of bread, and then sprinkling sugar on it and eating it that way. And I thought it was just wonderful.
We had all that same experience because I did that in my home.
Yeah, I remember you telling me how you either cut out, and then lift up a slice of it and dump it
With a
on.
pancake turner and put yours over there.
Yeah.
I just took spoons, I didn't know how to use a pancake turner.
Well, I don't remember her in those years, but I do know her, I remember her father very well. And her older brother, Bob, because Bob was a basketball player, and Dad was the coach at Reese College, and so Dad was out recruiting, and he'd stop, and there, we would take our wheat wagon was right past their home to get to the elevator to dump the wheat. And Brother McKinlay would be off times around the house, and we would stop and visit with him. So I knew him, I knew where they lived. I just knew it as the McKinlay place, you know. I didn't know any of the children. I did know Bob, but not very well. I just knew him. But I knew her father, and I didn't know her mother at that time. But they were very well liked in the community. He was probably the most influential man in the city, in the town.
But,
I was very.
but the winter before I was 14, I think that's the winter, that one, the one before, we had just terrible snows, more snow. We always had a lot of snow up there then, but this was an especially bad winter. And there was a bus, a school bus of children that got stuck in the snow, going to high school, going from one of the other outlying areas into Sugar City to high school. The bus got stalled in a snowstorm, and they couldn't get out, and it was so cold that several of the children froze to death. About half of the children on that bus froze to death. And the ones that survived had to take the coats off the ones who had died and wrap themselves up to keep warm so they wouldn't die. And that was such a tragedy that my father just could not bear the thought of my riding a school bus to high school. And so when school started and it was time for me to go to high school, I went to Ogden. He sent me to Ogden to my mother's sisters, to my Aunt Mary's, to go to school, and then during
Where the winters weren't so severe.
where I could just walk to school, where the winters were not so severe, and I could just walk to school. See, there was not a high school in Newdale. The Newdale kids went to Sugar City on the bus to high school, and that was what Dad was afraid to have me do. So I went and lived with Aunt Mary. And then by Christmas time, he had sold our home in Newdale and bought the Packer home in Rexburg. But it was the middle of the winter, but he wanted me to come home from Aunt Mary's and go to school there in Rexburg. And so he wanted to move to Rexburg. And Packers didn't want to move until spring because they were going up to the dry farm in the spring.
Right.
And so we moved into the downstairs of the home, and it was a lovely home.
It wasn't the basement, it was
And
downstairs.
Like this.
It was
Outside entrance.
It was a walk-in basement, and there were 3 bedrooms and a bath, and a kitchen, living room downstairs. And so we lived there from Christmas time until spring, and then Packers moved up to the dry farm, and then we moved upstairs. And then that's where we met at dinner home. And we talked about that, didn't we?
No, not yet. Not
Now,
yet.
aren't you out of time?
Oh, I've got a couple of minutes left. Actually, I am out of time. It says that I've got 5 minutes, but now is a good stopping point. What I think we'll do on one of the next tapes is talk about high school. I'd like to talk about your high school first, and then we'll be right up to where you and Dad met, and then we can talk about that.
Okay, that sounds good.
Thank you.